Today's 713 day to come here to learn. I'm learning. I hope this will support your dreams, your goals, allow you to become the person that you want to become. Today I speak about family again, and I want to share unhealthy ways to deal with conflicts. Yesterday I shared healthy ways to deal with conflicts in a family. Today I'll share 10 ways that you understand that this is an unhealthy way to deal with a conflict. So of course, you're able to understand when someone else doing something unhealthy and build boundaries on it, or if you understand that maybe you create some kind of conflict and you are dealing with a conflict in an unhealthy way, that means awareness is first step to start working and improving. So let's get started. So number one is yelling and shouting. This is an unhealthy way to deal with conflict. So if you yell, shout, that means you are not controlling your emotions. Your emotions is controlling you. Now, a lot of times when you shout and yell, you say things that you don't mean. And a lot of times it says that when you're speaking angry, that is a time when you are regretting your speech the most. So we need to be very careful, yell and shout, because that is an unhealthy way to deal with conflict. So that means if you see that your emotions is rushing, maybe you're able to redirect that emotion somewhere else. Take a break for yourself, for the conflict, come back when you don't need to yell, you don't need to shout, and really finish that conflict and discussion in the discussion way. Number two is blaming and accusations. Blaming and accusations. That means that what do you do during conflict? Do you blame other person right away? Do you accuse them for all the things that they did? Or are you saying that this is an issue, and we together need to figure out what to do with this issue, what do we need to do with this conflict, what do we need to do with this problem that we need to solve? So that means the problem, the conflict is the enemy, not each other. And that means that at that moment you don't need to blame, oh, you created this problem, you created this conflict, this problem, this conflict is because of you. You don't say that. You say, okay, we have this issue, we have this conflict. Let's figure out not whose fault, but let's figure out how we could together work on this and how we could make sure that this works. So blaming and accusation is an unhealthy way to deal with conflict. Number three is silent treatment. This is an unhealthy way to deal with conflict for sure. So that means that when you have a conflict and you don't speak at all, you treat silently. This is a very unhealthy way to deal with conflicts. How possible is to deal with conflict when you do not communicate? That means conflict is dealt only through discussion. So you deal with silent treatment. That means, of course, we need to understand that one party is not committing to really make sure that this conflict doesn't show up again. Because a lot of times we solve the conflict, or we even, let's say, silent treatment, and we forget about it. That means, of course, we not deal with the conflict in general. Number four is manipulation. Emotional manipulation, some guilt tripping. A lot of different people use a lot of different manipulation techniques to really, in a conflict, to really win the conflict. Because a lot of times there's a feeling that there's a win and lose in a conflict. And you don't want to lose, so that means you start using manipulation techniques to win the argument. But when we speak about family, you need to understand that family is a family unit. So you do not want to have winners and losers family. You want to have a tribe together, a community together. So that means we understand that we need to understand that we don't want to manipulate each other. We need to be really aware what is the intention of this communication, and really use our techniques, manipulation techniques, because a lot of times manipulation techniques are persuasion or influence. When you understand that you do that for other person, because if you do for your own reason, that's manipulation. If you do for other people reason, the same thing. But a lot of times it could be the same thing, but the main thing is what is intention behind it. And if it is truly other person, sometimes it's just influence and persuasion. And persuasion and influence is a good thing if other person is able to improve. Number five is avoidance. Conflict resolution, avoidance. Of course, it's easy to understand that if you avoid the conflict, it will not be solved. That's a very unhealthy way to deal with conflicts. Now, it could be that if you avoid the conflict, that conflict will disappear. But what happens? The conflict gets bigger and bigger, and it repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. And after a while, that conflict that was pretty small becomes monstrous. Because there's a lot of things included in the next time, because that conflict becomes bigger and bigger. So of course, undealt conflict builds up. So avoidance is one thing that really creates that build up of the conflict. Number 6 is bringing up the past. That's a terrible way and really unhelpful way to deal with conflict. When you usually discuss a conflict, every single conflict is individual conflict, unless of course build up in the past that you avoided for a long time. Now, because of avoidance, a lot of times at that moment there's a lot of bringing up the past. Do you remember what you did? Do you remember what you did? And then pointing fingers that blaming someone else for the action that you took. Now, of course, it could be that other person did those things, but a lot of times you need to realize that if someone did something wrong, then that is not permission for you to do the wrong as well. Because a lot of times people have a tendency, oh, if you do that, okay, that means, look, I will do exactly the same way. But if our morals and our values are very strong, we realize that if someone else did something wrong, that doesn't allow to do us the same thing to them. Because our values are much more important than what other person did to us. And at the same time, we need not to bring the past in this conversation, because they grew up for that maybe you grew up for that, and we are able to move forward and really discussing this argument, this conflict, this problem, and not bringing the past. Especially when people went through that and they are much better than it was in the past. Number 7 is name calling on insults. Name calling or insults. Now, of course, it's very easy to understand that it's an unhealthy way to deal with conflicts. How are you supposed to deal with conflicts if you start name calling other? Oh, you are stupid, you're not understanding anything, and really insulting other person and try to bring them down, that they could not feel good. Now, how do you feel when someone is insulting you? How do you feel when someone is name calling you? You feel sad, defensive, and you just want to do the same thing to other person. That means the conflict will stay the same. When you want to deal with conflict, that means you don't want to put the other person down. You want to uplift them and have more energy to really deal with this conflict. Because when every single person wants to really uplift other person, and both of them have more energy, they're able to have more capacity, focus not to beat someone else down, but really how to beat this conflict down in general. Number 8 is threats. That is a very unhealthy way to deal with conflicts. How are you supposed to really deal with conflicts when you threaten the other person for really trying to fix the problem, fix the conflict? Threats is very unhealthy. That means that we really need to avoid any kind of threats with emotions, maybe we can even say that, oh, I will avoid you, I will treat you silently, or I will not communicate with you, or there's so many threats that people do as a manipulation technique to really avoid the conflict. Number 9 is physical violence. Physical violence. That is a very unhelpful way to deal with conflicts, and I think that people, when they're not able to communicate anymore, their only last step is physical violence. And of course, that is very unhealthy. And there's never big enough conflict that someone's supposed to use violence. So that means that if someone else uses violence, you need to walk away. And if you using violence, that means there's a time to really work and understand that what was past, but you could be totally different. You're able to choose better you. You're able to choose not allow anger to use physical violence and abuse to other people when they want to really deal with the conflict. And the last one, of unhealthy conflict resolution is escalation. Escalation. So it means a lot of times we escalate things. So that means it could be a small problem, it could be a small conflict, but now we're making a mountain of it. It's a fly, but we start making that problem conflict as an elephant-sized problem, and start to really saying things that make that problem bigger and bigger and bigger. So that means when we have a conflict, we need to make that conflict as it is. Not try to make it bigger, not make it smaller, not minimize, not maximize. Really, this is a problem. Really gather the details, what happened. Because it's very important to really gather information, what exactly happened. With understanding who is right. Because during the conflict, the most important part is not who is right, but what's right. I really love that. That's when we deal with a conflict, we need to understand not who is right, but what's right. So it means every single time, every single conflict, we need to come into them with a mindset that I want to learn what's right in this situation. At that moment, all those unhealthy things disappears. All the avoidance, silent treatment. You're not able to really think about avoidance when you want to understand what's right at this moment. And of course, you always understand that avoidance is not right. Now, I mentioned yesterday that taking a break is healthy. But what is not healthy, avoid that problem altogether, all that conflict. Because you need to say, if I'm taking a break, what is the reason of the break? I need to explain to other party why you need to break. Or I need to think of this is how I deal with things. And I really am not able to jump in and my emotions are not in place and I will not be able to think clearly. So let's have this conversation, discussion about this conflict tomorrow at 2 p.m. So other person knows exactly that this conflict will be solved and you have a time to have a break. So, because a lot of times people say, oh, let's discuss tomorrow. Let's discuss after a week. Another person feels that this will not be solved and they want to deal with this today. Anyways. But avoidance is one part of this that let's deal next week. Because that next week probably will come and people forget about the conflict, and that's where it comes to build up of the conflict, and then next time they have exactly the same conflict because nobody worked through it, nobody understood what they're able to do to really solve that. So I think that there's more things that is unhealthy in the family conflict resolution, but I think that is a good start to have awareness that there is healthy ways and there's unhealthy ways to really deal with conflicts. And now, knowing that there is a lot of different ways, really reflect, what do you do when conflict arises? I could tell you, I'm not perfect. I did quite a few things that is unhealthy, and I need to be much more aware. And I start to see people who really are good and amazing at that. But I love looking to people who are amazing and I admire. What do they do when they have a conflict? What do they do when they have a problem? And when you look after other people and you have great association, you're able to learn from them and then implement in your life. I highly recommend you to do as well. Look the people that you admire a lot. How do they deal with problems? How do they deal with conflicts? And you'll try to implement the same things in your family, in your life, that your conflicts could get smaller, your conflicts could disappear faster, and really you live less stressful life and much more fulfilled and joyful life. So I hope you choose something and see you tomorrow.